while we're waiting. Is everybody comfortable? Not too cold for a change? All right. Just remember we are doing the 50-50 raffle, so if you haven't bought your tickets, go to the front desk. We will be selling them out in front of the exhibit hall tonight as well, right before the reception. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So this particular session I was really intrigued about doing because I run another conference in the recycling arena, and to see the growth of AI being used in material recovery facilities is just amazing. What's happening with robotics? How are they teaching the software, the AI? It's connected with the MRFs to look at what's coming out of the curbside recycling program and say, that's a PET bottle, that's an HDPE bottle, that is a piece of glass, and then sort it by having the robot come in and pick up whatever it is that's on that conveyor line and get it into the particular streams that they're trying to set aside for recycling purposes. So I had two presentations, abstracts that were submitted, both from Brendan and Jevins, on the use of AI and the remediation. So I thought, well, let's take it to the next step. Let's talk about AI use in business. Let's talk about AI use from a marketing perspective, and kind of dive into this whole subject, because we're all faced with it, whether you want to accept it or not. It is part of what we are going to be going through. So with that, let me just double check with Tim. Are we ready? All right, go. Yeah, and I want to hear Vince's stuff. Let's set the stage on how AI is being used.
Welcome to the Florida Remediation Conference. "30 years of excellence." Orlando, Florida, 2025. Thank you, esteemed sponsors and guests. Prepare to be empowered.
That'll get us going where we need to be, right? Set the stage, because I've got a panel that kind of meets that whole music content, right? These guys are experts in their areas of practice, and so I'm just going to introduce all of them right off the bat, and then we'll go down the line. I've got Vincent Hunt, who was founder and CEO of the Bureau of Creative Intelligence, to my right. Next to him is Peter Lakanen, as president of Platinum Web Development. Next to him is Brendan Brown, and Brendan is a principal scientist and nature-based solutions discipline leader for CDM Smith. And then Jevins Waddell, who is president and co-founder of TRIUM Environmental. So setting this panel off, we had a quick little conference call, so they wanted to know what my ideas on this session was going to be about. And so we've kind of divvied up this process. I've asked Vince to set the stage, and you'll understand why I asked him to set the stage after he gets through talking. Probably within the first 30 seconds, you'll understand why I asked Vince to do this. We're then going to shift over, and I'm going to have Peter talk about how he's using AI from a business development. And he'll show some examples of some things that he's done for me in my program on our marketing side. And then we're going to get into the remediation side. We're going to talk about the use of AI in various remedial activities, and that's where Brendan and Jevins come in. So with that, Mr. Hunt, it is all yours, sir.
Almost thought I was going to have to get up here and threaten everybody, like, clap it up. No, I'm just kidding. Look, Gene knows that I am not a talking head. I like to engage and really connect. Whenever we think about AI, I always remind people this is about human business, right? Humans, because at the center of all things is us, right? And I'm going to say this, and this might get me canceled, but I'm going to just start off this way. because I want to, again, like ground and set context to where we're going, right? I don't know how many Christians we got in here or Bible readers, but I'm going to say this. And again, this might get me canceled, but it's all good because I believe in it 100%. In the beginning, in the scriptures, it said, let there be light, and there was light. And then if you look at it, there's like 6 more days of prompting, right? And on the 7th day, there's some rest. I want you guys to all understand that you are the original prompt. So when we start talking about fear and monuments and the things that we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, Gene gave me just a few minutes to kind of ground some things. I want you to look at it through the lens in which the lens I look through, which isn't necessarily the right one, but it's one that will begin to distill some of the things that we're going to challenge ourselves with, which is fear, monuments, and then how do we go to the age of allies, right? You are the original prompt. So if all y'all can participate with me, this is real risky, because y'all might not believe it yet, but this is real risky. I'm going to ask you to do it. On the count of 3, I just want everybody to say, I am the original prompt. 1, 2, 3. That was, they kind of believe it. One more time. 1, 2, 3. You are the original prompt. When I sit in front of ChatGPT, it is usually just a little cursor. It's a cursor. That joke could just be sitting there waiting on me. It's waiting on my genius. It's waiting on me to engage with it, to connect with it, to tell it what to do, to go do the functions, which is both processing and synthesis. That's what it does really, really well. So let's get into this, because we don't have too much time, but we have a little bit of time. My name is Vincent. I'm the founder and the CEO. I'm a multidisciplinary creative. I'm also a frontier technologist. For about 25 years of my life, I've been looking around corners, helping organizations navigate the uncertain, the unseen. How do we leverage these technologies? How do we leverage it for competitive advantage? Move things forward, innovate, grow, build. So that's what I do. These are some of the companies I have the opportunity to do this really cool work with, get in their lab and kind of play, help them expand their capacity creatively as well as their innovation. This talks a little bit about the Bureau of Creative Intelligence. I'm not going to go through this whole slide and read it and insult your intelligence. So if you take a picture of it, you can read it later, or you can just go to our website at bureauofcreativeintel.com. But let's talk. Big pink elephant in the room. Fear. Let's talk about fear. How many of you actually have a fear of AI? Raise your hand and just be honest with me. How many of you have a fear? Okay, it's better than what it used to be. When this whole thing first began, I can promise you about 90% of the room would raise their hand. So we're only going to spend a little bit of time in this area of fear, but I want you to understand that even if you have a little bit of reluctance as it pertains to approaching these tools, and let me emphasize tools, because that's exactly what they are. How many of you actually use tools in your work right now? Spreadsheets, Word, highly sophisticated like tools that you use to like do the things that you do. You got tools, right? AI is no different. It just seems a little freaky because it impeaches on something that we've all held at very high esteem, our knowledge, the way that we synthesize our own intelligence. How many PhDs do we got in the room? Raise your hand. PhDs, you've gone to the higher level, and most everybody in this room is highly educated. Yeah, you spent a lot of time and money getting there. Then all of a sudden you got your computer talking to you. And that joker spitting information out. You're like, wait a minute, I took a whole bunch of years to get that. Right? It's a little intimidating. This is real. This is all real. That's why I say this is human business. Right? So fear. So to kind of like help you guys understand the origins of fear, we're going to do a really quick exercise. Is that cool with everybody? Hopefully this works. I've been rehearsing this all morning, so hopefully it works. If it don't work, just blame it on the technology. Don't blame it on Vince. Right on? Let's get busy. Let's jump right in here. Hey, Athena.
Hey there, I'm right here and all set whenever you need me on stage. Let's do this.
Okay, bet. So I'm in the room with a bunch of geniuses. I'm looking at them and they're looking at me. And I'm looking at you. But we got to do this exercise around fear. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through the list that we talked about earlier as it pertains to movies. Can you just start to rattle off those movies? Now, I'm going to give them some instructions. What I want you guys to do in the room, when you hear a movie that you've seen before, I just want you to raise a hand. If you hear 2 movies, I want you to raise 2 hands and keep your hands up. Is that cool? Is that cool with everybody? All right, cool. So, Athena, can you give us some movies?
Absolutely, let's do it. All right, everyone, here we go. First up, 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. Who's seen it? Hand up. The Terminator, that's another hand if you've seen it. Third, The Matrix, 99. Keep those hands going up if that's familiar. Fourth, I, Robot, 2004, another classic. Hands up if you've seen that one. And lastly, let's add Ex Machina, 2014. If you've seen that one, raise your second hand. All right, look around the room. You got both hands up. That's a little sign that maybe some of those fears are just a bit of movie magic. Thanks, everyone.
Right-o. Can y'all clap it up for Athena? So the way I use AI is very, very symbiotic in nature. A lot of my work involves the idea of symbiotic creativity. How do we actually combine ourselves with the machines to actually do our work at a higher level? Now, what I just did was never ever possible before. What you saw in real time was research happening in real time. Like, I did not go look up those movies on Google. She did it for me. So therefore, we could get this job done. But you guys all had two hands up in surrender around the idea that perhaps the fear that you have around AI is manufactured. That you've been programmed. Since 1927, they've been making movies showing us that AI is our enemy. Where's all the women in the house? Women in the house, raise your hand. I see you. Put your hand up. Y'all know AI coming to get your husband. Y'all done seen that movie. He's like, he got jokes. No, I'm dead serious. Y'all seen that movie, right? So again, they paint AI in this way where it creates fear. But the one that I'm a little bit more interested about is monuments. This is the one that I really want you to do some self-checking with. Monuments. You say, Vince, what are monuments? There are things that we do in our work each and every day, no matter how mundane they are, no matter how tedious the task is. Some of us have connected our identities to this work. I'm going to give you an example of it. You got Jack. Jack, he is the dopest at spreadsheets. In fact, he knows he's the dopest at spreadsheets because he got a little gold trophy at the last company picnic. And he sits it on his desk. And every time somebody walks by his desk, Jack is dope with the spreadsheets. They give him a high five. Jack really, really loves the way that makes him feel. What Jack has done, whether consciously or unconsciously, is connected part of his identity to them spreadsheets. So what I want you guys to do for just a moment, just think about how many things that you do in your work, no matter how tedious and laborious it is, how much you hate it, how much sweat of your brow makes it like that you got to give. You don't like it, but as soon as I say AI can come and do it better, you feel a certain kind of a way. And then you want to challenge it, but AI hallucinates. It did in the very beginning, it hallucinated a lot, but do you think the systems are getting better or worse? Better. So you might want to check in with your identity and your ego and realize that sometimes you got to let the tedious things go so you can do the higher level thinking that you've been designed to do as human beings. Again, you are the original prompt. Does that make sense to everybody? If that makes sense, I want you to say, that makes sense, Vince, so I can see who I got to do some remedial with. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's keep moving. So the last piece that I want to talk about is allies. How do we now collaborate with AI in a way that we can add more efficiency to our work? Right? 2 things that AI has that we don't have in our meat locker optimized. Right? Processing and synthesis. I don't know about any of you, but I cannot synthesize all of the world's information in my head right now. I haven't figured that out. And if you have, I want to talk to you after this. But AI can do that. It can synthesize tons amounts of information. I was listening to a podcast, and I'll end with this. I was listening to a podcast. And in this podcast, at the end, something so beautiful was said. The podcast host asked the professor, she says, okay, based on everything that we talked about, I'm with you, I'm on board. What are the skills that human beings will need moving into the future? And he said something so simple. He said, decision making and judgment. Think about it. You guys are all craftsmen and women in your trades. You've been doing what you've been doing for a pretty long time. The machine will spit out to you insights and information that you're going to have to make decisions about, lived experiences. This is stuff that AI does not have. I call it the God sauce, the stuff that makes you human. Right? Lean into that. Rethink work. We were having dinner last night, and the question is critical thinking. What is critical now, though? If we don't have to pull up Google and 17,000 links and read 44,000 articles to get to some point. You have to ask yourself, what is critical now? I would have to say that humanness is a competitive advantage moving forward. And if we can double down on the things that make us human, because remember, empathy at one point was a nice to have, or attention, the ability to like really, really focus on somebody when they're talking to you because you're not thinking about them spreadsheets, Jack. Think about it. We're going into one of the greatest times that we've ever seen. I see billionaires in this room, and I'm not trying to be the hype man. Some of you guys have processes in your business that you will innovate using AI, and you will put it into the marketplace, and you will eat forever. So this isn't about replacing you. This is about augmenting you, making you more capable, and actually be able to manifest visions and dreams about things that you've been wanting to do in ways that you've never seen before. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Gene so we can get into this awesome panel and we can get busy. And this is where y'all start clapping.
Thank you, Vince. You understand why I asked him to kind of set the stage for us. I've sat in on many mind map sessions with this gentleman here when we're talking about some of the projects over the past years. And that is just eye-opening. If you haven't done a mind map before and done brainstorming with regard to a problem or an opportunity, you need to talk to this gentleman. Now we're going to move into it from the business aspect. How can AI, and we'll show you some examples, be used on the business development, database, marketing, and so forth. So Peter Lakanen is going to take over the reins and provide some examples and a little bit of insight into what's going on the business side.
Green button for the clicker? Yeah. All right, awesome. Good morning. My name is Peter Lakanen. I've been a lifelong creative, writer, artist, musician, programmer. I'm reminded of something a friend of mine once said when we were talking about creativity. He said, creativity is only as useful as you can apply it to your everyday functional life. And I try to remind myself of that as much as I can, not just for obviously creative projects like art, but not so obvious projects that can benefit from creativity, like programming, like accounting, like chopping wood and carrying water. I think of myself as a professional puzzle solver, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how AI can be used as a force multiplier for creative work. Specifically, I want to talk about this with respect to creating videos for marketing. For a long time, businesses had a certain minimum budget that they had to meet in order to even think about creating videos for promotion. And you'd have to hire a number of people. As you can see that I've listed here, a writer, a director, actors, editor, someone to run the camera. It's a big expense, and it can cost, starting at mid four figures easily. With AI, we lower the barrier to entry by using AI to create a lot of the content that normally we would have to create from scratch. And in the past, some of this could be sourced through things like stock photography, stock video, and things like that. But the problem, the challenge with using stock photo and stock photography is how many other people are using that same photo in their ads? How many other people are using that stock video in their ads? And so one of the things that's really appealing about AI is it allows you to easily and affordably create unique and novel content. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you the marketing video that I created for the Florida Remediation Conference And then I want to walk you through in quick steps kind of the different ways that I used AI to put it together. So first we'll watch the video.
Attention environmental remediation professionals in Florida and around the country. Join us November 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Orlando for the 30th Annual Florida Remediation Conference. FRC 2025 will be one of the nation's premier events in soil, air, and water remediation. Learn the latest methods and technologies, gain insights into regulatory issues, and network with your fellow professionals. Stay ahead of the curve by registering today at FloridaRemediationConference.org.
So how did I do it? Well, if you remember that list of different types of roles that you need in order to create a video, the first thing you need is a writer. You need someone that can come up with content. And so what I did was, Gene provided me with the press release for a Florida Remediation Conference, and I crafted a prompt for Claude to kind of give me a head start. And the prompt is, you are a veteran expert social media marketer. I need a script for a 30-second video to use in social media marketing for a professional conference called the Florida Remediation Conference. We are targeting environmental remediation companies and professionals. I need an idea, a compelling title, 3 different novel opening introductory lines or sentences to act as click confirmation for the viewer so they keep watching. We need at least 3 different versions for testing and consideration. Then I need a bulleted outline. The first point needs to be novel and compelling. The second point needs to be even more amazing. And then I need a 30-second script for the video. And then I detailed specifically what bullet points I needed and with more information. I inserted the press release, and Claude gave me a whole bunch of information. Now, this still required a lot of work on my part because I had to go through it and read it. I had to review the script, and I made a bunch of edits. And I had conversations with Gene, and we kind of powwowed on how we wanted to streamline and focus the content so it was as effective as we could make it after starting with Claude's input. The next thing that I did was, I've done a lot of voice work, so I had an idea of how I wanted it to sound, and so I recorded myself reading the script. And this, we're just going to do the first sentence.
Attention environmental remediation professionals in Florida and around the country. Join us November 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Orlando for the 30th Annual Florida Remediation Conference.
So then I took that and I plugged it into a system called 11 Labs that allowed me to use AI to change the voice into, they label it Bill, and I think of Bill as kind of the NPR narrator voice.
Attention environmental remediation professionals in Florida and around the country. Join us November 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Orlando for the 30th Annual Florida Remediation Conference.
So you can hear how it's a different voice, but it still maintains my intonation and my cadence, which was the most important thing. And this is happening all over the world in terms of creative use of AI, whether it's people dancing and then converting their dance movements, so you see like a Smurf dancing instead of them, face replacement. There's tons of ways that you can use AI for stuff like this. So then I sent it to Gene, and we had this great dialogue back and forth via text. And so now I'm starting to put it together. I've got the script, he loves it, he loves the audio, so now I'm having to fill in the pieces. And I realized that I really didn't have a lot of good content photos from FRC, and so he was able to provide me with some images. Now what's interesting is that these are all static images, and what happened is that then I was able to load them into another AI program that is able to take an initial image and change it into a video as per my written instructions, my prompting. And so here's one where I started with just an image, and we zoom in. Here's another one of an after-hours networking event. And then here is a room not No, it's not this room, but not dissimilar from this room.
Let me real quick.
Yeah.
You understand, as is still photo, he is taken and modified and has got people going into a room that we had from lunch, and they're sitting down, walking into the room and then sitting down.
So I sent that to him, and my phone rings like 5 minutes later, and Gene's like, how did you do this? Because he was so blown away, because he'd been seeing me take images that I created from scratch and convert them to video, but seeing video photos that he knew he took, he knew that there was no video associated with it. It just blew his mind that that it was able to actually convert them to video that kind of makes sense. And I was like, well, they don't all make sense. And so I sent him, I tried to do some from the golf tournament, and none of the videos would work. So I sent him these 3 videos, and they're just 5 seconds each. I'll show you. This one, it's panning the wrong way, even though I wanted it to pan across the people. This next one, the person in the background drops something. It does something weird. And this third one, I thought this was the one until you see the woman with the weird blue thing on her head at the end, right there. And we call them dice rolls, because when you're dealing with generative AI, a lot of times you just got to retry. There's a phrase that I love to use called ruthlessly curating, where I'm always trying to generate as much as I can and pick only the absolute best. His response when I sent him the videos, that's crazy. Real quick, I want to walk you through what we did with Waste Exchange. In this case, you're seeing something that's more traditional of the way that we've worked through most of the videos that I've done for him. So for each scene, each moment where we need an image, I'd send him a mosaic, and then he'd circle the one that he wanted me to use and send it back. Pay attention, you're going to see all of these in just a moment. So
Why
I'm
pay to
generating
throw
all
away
these
materials
images.
when you could be saving money?
Let me back up. So I'm generating, all of these images are created from scratch. None of these images actually exist in the real world. And so now I combined them all to make a video for his Waste Exchange website.
Why pay to throw away materials when you could be saving money instead? For over 40 years, WasteExchange.org has been matching waste generators and users to help smart businesses and municipalities turn disposal costs into savings. The Waste Exchange is your free online directory for listing and finding traditionally discarded materials that still have value. We're talking about plastics, paper, cardboard and other corrugated containers, used drums of acid, solvents, and other chemicals, plastics and rubber, surplus wooden pallets, old office equipment, and other materials. Visit our website to see everything you can list and find. WasteExchange.org, reducing waste, saving money, and keeping the environment clean.
So the title of my presentation is Using AI as a Force Multiplier for Creative Work. I could never have created these without AI. I would never consider doing that type of work because of the amount of time that would take. And it's kind of outside my primary realm in which I operate. I don't do a lot of video work traditionally, although that's changing. So I was doing all the editing and putting all these together. As a last thing, I just wanted to share with you, I've done a lot of AI art for the last 4 years. I created a selection of 25 AI art pieces that are my gift to the Florida Remediation Conference. These are all available, public domain, CCO. You don't need to pay me, you don't need to credit me, you don't need to do anything. These are available on a website that I have. On a business card, I've got a QR code. And if you'd like a piece of AI art to take home, on the back of every one of my business cards, I've got one of these pieces as a physical piece. And we're done. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, now we're going to jump into the remedial side. You can kind of see how I've worked with Peter to use AI in marketing some of the things that we've done. Now we're going to jump in and learn about how is this being used in the remediation side. So Brendan's going to start us off. So,
Thanks. Well, first I wanted to give props to Vincent in that music video or the music he started with. When I was playing before we started, I was like, there's no way I could pull that off on one of my presentations. So props to him for doing that. So I've been working with digital data and AI for about 6 or 7 years now, and I'm always fascinated by the potential and the possibilities. And I frequently discuss AI with my wife, who's a college professor. I think in her industry, probably a net negative. In our industry, hopefully a net positive. But I've often started my presentations inside my company and internal presentations and conferences that, the old adage that we all hear that AI isn't going to take your job, somebody who uses AI is going to take your job. And, my wife, who's much smarter than I am, remarked to me the other day, that's not the most inspiring message for your colleagues and coworkers when you're talking about AI adoption. And we just celebrated 14 years of marriage, and I've come to learn that most of the time she's right. So I kind of had to go back to the drawing board and think a little bit. And I think our industry is different. As Vincent was talking about, we all have we all have a lot of education or on-the-job training in our areas, and we're subject matter experts. And so, we as consultants, as industry, as regulators, we're making the decisions about what's acceptable and how we go about doing things. So, and then I think there's another aspect too, that it seems like we have a lot more job openings than programs are graduating people to help. So we have a lot to do, and so the AI can help us. So I want to continue on that theme that Vincent was talking about, that people-centric team. This is AI is a tool, just like any other, that we can leverage to help us execute more work and free us up to put our critical thinking into other areas, so we don't have to do the mundane Excel spreadsheets. We can go beyond that. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, when we think AI, we tend to think, large language models, Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, but AI is more than just those large language models. But they're really useful, obviously, for helping us digest things, maybe, do a first draft of an email or report or summarize information. But, some experts think that these large language models kind of might have reached a productivity plateau. They've ingested pretty much the entire internet, almost all the digital content that humans have created. And we all know how much truth there is on the internet that they've trained on, right? And they're just not getting any better. And to get them to the next level, to maybe that artificial general intelligence, there just hasn't been enough digital content that's been created by humans to get them to the next level. So I'm going to talk just a little bit today about how we can use technical AI. So not large language models, not opening Copilot and just throwing something in there and trying to get an answer. Those models weren't built to solve remediation questions or environmental engineering questions. That's not what they were trained on, and that's not what they were intended to do. But we do have the ability to use open source models to answer questions with technical data that we already have. So at CDM Smith, we've been using, the area that I'm working in mainly is using remote sensing and AI to characterize sites and figure out what's going on. But we have a lot of examples of using environmental data sets to help us solve environmental challenges of today. So when we say AI, it's kind of an umbrella term. There's subsets underneath within that umbrella term, and we don't have to get into too much of the details, but just understand that there's different types of models. It's not all large language models. There's also machine learning and deep learning. But at the end of the day, we're taking input data, training a model, and trying to get predictions out of it, predictions that then we can then act upon and figure out sites or figure out what's going on at our remediation site to get answers that we then make decisions on. And so some of these deep learning models, the architecture and framework has been around for decades. And it's just now that we have the computer processing power that we do that's really kind of spread the advent of that power. So Jeff Hinton, sort of the godfather of AI, noted that if he had taken some of his models that he had created in the 80s and ran them on the best computer that he had at the day and hit go, some of the stuff that he wanted to run would still be running today. But if you took that same model and put it on a computer that we have right now, the new computer would catch up to where the old one is in less than a second. So this underscores the computer processing power that we have now to take these large data sets and break them down and answer questions. So we're trying to make predictions with these AI models. So what does that look like in the remediation world? This can apply to a lot of different facets, but in this context, I'm sort of talking about remote sensing products. So things like satellite data, plane data, LiDAR data, things that we use to figure out what's going at our site. And our target variable is what we're trying to predict. So in a lot of the models that I've worked on developing, we might be trying to predict where streams are or where wetlands are. But we could also use this to predict where pipe breaks are going to occur in an asset management plan, or concentrations of VOCs. But what our model variables are going to be are things that we think are going to help us predict that target variable. So, if we were trying to predict where streams were, it might be a remote sensing data set that shows us where water is. Or if it's wetlands, it might be LiDAR data. So something that we think is going to influence what we really want to know about. But the nice thing about the input variables is they're easier. We already have those. So first, in order to build a model, we have to start with a complete data set to train the model, just like Copilot did. They started with existing data that they scraped from the internet. But here, we have a lot of site data already for a site. So we start with a complete data set, and then we break that data set into two. So now we got training data and validation data. So all models need that training and validation data, and you can break it up in a lot of different ways. But then what we do is we take that training data portion, and that's our data inputs. Then we combine that with our target variable, or we often call it ground truthing, that things that we know to be true in the field. So we take our data inputs, things that we think are going to predict what we want to know, what we know to be true, and then we combine that into a machine learning model. So now we have a trained machine learning model. So then we take that validation data back that was in our back pocket, and we feed those data inputs into the machine learning model. So this is data that the machine learning model has never seen before, and it's going to give us our predictions. Then we take our validation data back out where we actually know the values, and then we compare that to our model predictions. And this is a really important step because it can give us accuracy, it tells us model accuracy, and then oftentimes we can actually look inside of the model as well to figure out how well it does at predicting X versus Y in what we're trying to figure out. And so now when we know that accuracy, we as subject matter experts can interpret those results accordingly. All right, I'm going to kick it over to the next presenter, so thank you for your time.
All right, I'm going to have Jevins come on up here and show what he's been working on. We're going to try to save some time at the end for Q&A because I know there's going to be some questions from the audience. So Jevins, all yours.
Thanks, Gene. Good morning, everyone. So when I got invited to come to this, as Gene mentioned, we had this little conversation. I realized quite quickly that I was going to represent that rule-bound engineering itch that everybody needs scratched after we just went through this high-level creativity stuff. So amazing content so far. It actually sets us up really well. I'm pleased to be here. My first time to Florida, actually. So TRIUM was an environmental remediation company for a good number of decades and then shifted into the AI space following a movie I actually watched, which was called AlphaGo, where Google's DeepMind played a game called Go. And this inspiration that this Go master realized when he was competing against this machine, or the machine learning. And it was in the third game, and he was losing. And then he realized he had to stop competing against the machine, and he needed to learn from it. And he ended up winning one of the 5. The machine clearly was superior in that state, but it shifted his mentality. He stopped thinking about it as it's us versus them and thought, what can I actually get from this? And that's what pivoted for me. So I'm going to get into a bit more detailed stuff, but AI in the environmental monitoring space, which is where I'm going to speak to mostly, has seen progressive growth, sensors to detect compounds. We've talked about it, or I think there's some PFAS coming up in the next session. So as we introduce new contaminants, we need to measure for them. And the current focus, though, on AI has been more on the analysis side. So what can we do with the data we have already? It was discussed that the large language models have probably harvested most, if not all, of the internet. So in order for it to get more intelligent, we have to create more data. And so how can we use AI to generate more data? Because, and this is where Brendan was going, we can use predictive modeling now, but we still have to ground truth it in some state, in some way, and that's what we've started to do. Oh, there we go. So we call it field first AI. So this is the tool for the practitioners to use out in the field to make better decisions. And it's a shift in paradigm because a lot of the standard methodologies that I grew up doing, these old habits that I have, emotional scars I'm from Canada, so freezing in January, it's sub-zero and you're trying to do these vapor measurements, you give about this much effort because you just want to get out of there and get warm. So you sacrifice certainty for the sake of doing things fast or cheap, and so it kind of became a race to the bottom. And what we did when we pivoted into this AI space was we actually elevated certainty. We said, what if you can use these tools and this equipment to give you the best decision possible with the highest probability of the outcome you want, because that will inherently drive time and cost. It doesn't matter, how cheap that person works. He's going to be 200% faster because he didn't wait 3 days to make those decisions. So it was really, and we still battle this with people in our industry, is shifting mentalities and shifting towards leaning into the technologies, moving from retrospective to, forward thinking, so reactive to proactive decision making. The biggest challenge is not technology, it's people. And I wouldn't say challenge because we're the original prompt, but we've gone through all these events as we've developed as humans, and the Industrial Revolution was the last major one before the AI revolution really now. And in the Industrial Revolution, we were taught that you had to go to work 40 hours, do shifts, do this, and in the magic 50s and the 60s, it was all about that security, pensions. If you didn't work 35 years of your life, then you didn't have a way out. And so what we have is this attitude of hesitation towards it because they want it. Everybody knows AI so make our lives easier, but they don't want to shift how they behave or how they work or their day to accommodate it. So what you end up with is it misses, say, 1 out of 100 times. This is that hallucination piece. And they're like, see, like Vincent and I were chatting yesterday. It's like the really smart kid in your class. You were so jealous of it that until it finally made a mistake and you're like, see, that thing doesn't work. But yet, from a baseball analogy, if you hit the ball 30% of the time, you're considered a superstar as a human. So we're super tolerant to the imperfections in ourselves, but completely intolerant to the imperfection of technology. But yet, once it makes that one single mistake and it's taught to rectify, it never makes a mistake again. So is that really imperfection? Or is it also kind of a learning tool that we can work and leverage? Avoidance in the face of evidence. We've seen this a number of times. And again, that what's my value? What's my identity if I don't have hours to go to work? Maybe I don't want to be next to the kids, so I want those 40 hours instead of, kind of changing our work patterns. So it requires that shift. We have to lean into it. We have to learn how to trust, but yet ask questions. I asked someone, the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute at the University of Alberta, which was where Google's DeepMind was partially founded at. And I asked the one guy, I said, how do I tell a 10-year-old to prepare for the future? And he said, you don't tell him what to learn, you teach him how to learn, because that's what we need to do. We have to stop, we can't be competitive with AI and we can't be a slave to it. We have to be symbiotic with it, and that message came up earlier. So also further to this, why do we do this field first AI? Where did this come from? And Brendan showed that slide about the evolution of AI over the last 30 years. I think it goes even farther back than that. This case reference here was from the US EPA over 2 decades ago. They said that the variability in our environment where we work is multiple times more effect than the methodology of how we're measuring the contaminants in our environment. So we've known this for decades, but yet we didn't have the tools, and now we do. And so now we have to shift and pivot, because now we can measure the variability in our environment. And I'm getting a little more specific here. to soil and groundwater assessment remediation. So with tools, we can overcome some of these challenges. We can measure it, and we can get certainty in what we're doing. So Field First AI is really about getting a picture to what the result the lab's going to tell you. That's what, when you're in the moment and you're out in the field and you're looking at the pile of soil and you're trying to determine this contaminant level that you can't see, and you want to know how to sample it, where to sample it, to get the outcome that you're looking for, you need a field screening method that can do it. So, I talked about leveraging EPA guidance. This talks about that. This is also in that triad approach where you use a high density of field sampling data to get a picture of what your probable outcome is going to be and confidence in that, and then you use the lab to verify it. And this is that machine learning again. We're training it. We still need the lab. I'm not replacing those traditional practices. What we're doing is giving ourselves a much better chance of ensuring that we know what we're going to get when we send those samples to the lab. And I think that's been the missing piece. To the point, ConocoPhillips, I'm from Alberta, and it's heavily oil and gas centric there, and they're one of the more major producers. They just stopped doing field screening completely because they said, well, it's unreliable, we never get the right answer, so why bother? Send it all to the lab. That's days, cost, all these elevated things, but they just said, well, we'll just lean into the analytical side. Now we're opening that door, and we even got them on side with this, so they recognize the value of it. In our work environment, when we're in the field, there's a lot of factors that are out of our control. There's a lot of factors we've given control away, and this is where this AI piece is coming back in. We're taking back those controllable factors. We can't change the natural world. We can't change soil. We can't change contaminant distribution, which is the number one cause of variability. But we can change the ones below it, and I think, especially with people, there was some industrial studies presented that 20 to 70% of us will cut corners if we are under time and cost pressure, or we feel like the thing we're doing doesn't matter. So now if it does matter, we're less likely to cut corners. We put in standardization, we put in instrumentation, we put in machine learning, and now we can suddenly remove the variabilities and achieve accuracies that we haven't seen before. And that's what the graph on the right side shows. Conventional screening, trying to guess which way was it contaminated or not, versus the ASIS Petro system, been able to have a much higher probability of predicting the correct outcome. There's 3 systems within this machine learning platform that we've built out. The Petro system, which is designed for, does a really good job on extractable hydrocarbon ranges. The Aurora system, which is like a supercharger for vapor organic analysis. And then the salinity system, which is a chloride-specific salinity sensor to give you measurements of chloride in soil or water. So just to kind of close out a few slides, just to show you some of the use case examples. So the Petro system, it's a spectral-based extraction system. It is one of a kind in the world, as we've come to see. It's really great at measuring hydrocarbon ranges and giving you probabilities. And I know that not all jurisdictions use the same method or criteria. In this case, this is a fractional range, sort of similar to gasoline range, diesel range, oil range compounds. But what the important thing to take from this is that you could do a lot of samples. You can get a high degree of confidence in what you're doing. The US EPA recommended field screening is assessed first based on false negatives, then false positives, then bias, precision, and correlation is last. But this table shows you those in the green columns in the middle, that this practitioner was collecting OVA measurements. The red samples were the ones that they were going to send to the lab. If they'd followed that only, they would have missed the contamination in 2 out of the 5 test pits. But having the extraction-based sensor technology, which is the right tool for the job, Gene talked about that sorting plastics, right? Having the right tool it's like using a magnet to pick up plastic was an analogy. So the right tool found it so that, this customer had 60% more contamination, but they didn't have to go back and get that. So save some work. The ASIS Aurora system, which is that volatile gas analyzer. When you have confidence in the data you're collecting, you can build machine learning models. The red line in that very messy plot there shows the traditional methods of doing it, which showed like zero correlation. There was no way you can decide, is it going to be above, is it going to be below, what's the lab going to say? But as soon as we standardized for temperature, moisture, soil type, all of these factors, we removed it in this simple little box and now we have data we can rely. Now we can start to train it. Now when the lab sample does come back with its results, we can teach it against the vapor data, and now that practitioner on site has real data that they can use, they can lean into it and understand. The chloride sensor, sort of a similar outlay, providing you with a very visual way of understanding all of those factors in the way that we're supposed to assess field data. But the most important thing here, and same with all of these, is now you can assess variability, and the far right side of that graph shows, okay, sure, your sample result was below, but when we use duplicates and triplicates in the field now with this instrumentation, we can understand the spread of variability. So when you're getting close to the boundary of contaminants, there's going to be higher variability. We can measure that in the moment, apply it, and decide how confident are you. So even if that was below your criteria, what's the probability that if you resampled it would be above? So a regulator goes and does an audit, or something else, or you send that sample to the lab. What is there potential that you would get a different outcome? And so this is the kind of information you can start to get, and it's very simple. It's very easy to do. It's just using that machine learning. So in closing, Field First AI really has started to change the world. It's for a lot of our customers. They're pushing it down to their consultants. Their consultants are integrating it because it's saving time and money, less landfill, less waste to landfill, less repeated trips to work sites, better predictions of the amount of impacted material, better budgeting, better procurement, better disaster response. It's the most important here probably because time is money. You have to make a decision, and if you just can, insurance companies, everybody has a vested interest in addressing that problem as quickly as possible. Our regulatory environments that have seen it have all supported it. They think it's great. They said if you can save a customer time and money, they're going to spend more on something else now. So we can get to the end goals, we all get there faster. And now you give me evidence-based information. I can back that up. You've given me some lab data, now I've got confidence. And safety, this is one of the, you can fix a machine, you can't fix a human as easily. And this was an indirect one that we more recently came across for cost-wise, was that one less load of soil to the landfill might be a traffic accident avoided. One less day of workers on site might be someone that didn't get hit by a dump truck or an excavator. Those are all soft costs that do matter, and these types of tools and what we can use can save that. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the panel. Yeah, thanks.
All right, let's open it up to questions, audience questions. Who wants to ask one of our panelists a thought-provoking question related to AI? I know somebody's got some. If not, I'm going to start us off because we had a conversation right at the start of this between Nick Albergo, who is a professor at USF, and Vince talking about students using AI, right? And so, Nick, if you allow me to kind of paraphrase what we were talking about, I think it's from a professor's standpoint, there's a concern about, student using AI, but they're not learning anything. They're just basically grabbing stuff off the internet, having ChatGPT help write their paper for them. And how do we do that as an industry? How do we make sure that the kids that we're hiring coming out of school have actually learned something? So Vince, can you kind of weigh in on that?
Yeah, mic check. Yeah, so huge one. I do a lot of work in the HBCU space. I work with Thurgood Marshall College Fund, their strategic partners, and really working with some of the best minds in the HBCU space in the country. And this question started coming up probably 2 years ago when we started to see a proliferation of students actually getting over their own fears, and they're thinking about the environmental costs of using AI. They began to use it, right? And what had happened prior to that, so I want to go back a little bit, what happened prior to that was a lot of, if you say adult confusion, right? The professors and everybody was like, should we use it, should we not use it, So they're kind of standing on the line. Then you've got these students that have access to these tools and resources. How many of you actually read the book Lord of the Flies? Raise your hand. Okay, bet. Y'all remember what happened in Lord of the Flies, right? You put a bunch of young people on the island, it's going to go sideways real quick. Real fast. And this is no different. So what happened was there was an elevation that professors needed to actually start having these conversations with students to really help them dial in to use AI ethically, responsibly, and in ways that actually help enhance them and move them forward. But if we're really, really honest, and if we look at outcomes of students, even prior to AI, those jokers wasn't remembering anything either. Let's be honest. There was a whole bunch of tests taken, and students were still coming out dum-dums. And then some of them ended up in your workplace, and you're like, we got to retrain these jokers all over again. So that was before AI. So AI didn't create this. And I always say that people who have a propensity to be lazy, matter of fact, AI will accelerate their laziness. So there's conversations that we need to have as stewards over these young people and helping them understand the art of learning is important. And it's a responsibility that they're learning so they will have that skill of lifelong learning, because the world that they're moving into will be just more of that. So instead of just having a cry party around AI is here and it's like jacking stuff up, there's a higher level of responsibility I think that we all have, especially if we're dealing with young people. Sit down with them and help them understand that the information that the AI is giving them, we have to actually read it. This isn't a text message. This isn't a reel, right? This is real information, and you have to consume it and like start to make sense of it. Right? So there's work that we have to do, ladies and gentlemen, and I just can't blame it all on AI, because it's not that. This problem existed before AI. It's just now about to accelerate. It's about to get real weird, real fast. So it's our job to pump the brakes and say, what kind of conversations, because this is human business, it's not robot business. These are human beings sitting in classrooms. 40% of students coming out of higher education right now are unemployed or underemployed. That's Jack with the engineering degree who's now the pool guard. This is real. So it's a huge systemic problem that we all need to think about in a fundamentally new way. We can't just keep cookie cutting the days. We got to really, really dial into this generation, because if not, we'll lose it in exponential ways, not just a little bit, but a lot. Does that make sense to everybody? If that makes sense, say, Vince, that makes sense. 1, 2, 3. Right on. Does anybody? Yes.
Hang on. We'll get to you. I'm going to have the mic come around because we do have people online that won't be able to hear the audience. So,
hi, I'm Charlie Menzie from Exponent. About a month ago, the National Academy of Sciences came out with a report on cumulative impact analysis, a very complex subject. And Brendan, when you were giving your presentation, it kind of sparked something. There's been a lot of interest in this sort of spatially explicit analysis and integration over space, and now we have communities, and now we have multiple stressors. I think this would be an appropriate way to kind of address the questions that emerge with regard to cumulative impact analysis. And what I took away from that report, though, was it was largely general. There wasn't no methodology, or there wasn't like, how do we really do this problem? And I think it would be interesting. I'd be very interested in finding others that might be interested in kind of looking at this from the point of view of, application of AI, because it seems ripe for something like that to take that information and provide some guidance around how to appropriately consider this particular type of issue.
yeah.
Can I say something real quick, and I'm going to pass the mic? One, I just got goosebumps. No jokes. Whenever I get into rooms around professionals that I don't usually sit with, right, I think we're all sitting at this kind of really interesting crossroads where new frameworks, new models of thought, new methodologies, all these things are about to be born. And there's one, right? And he says, like, who wants to collaborate with me on this? So like in 2 years, I see this white paper that comes out from this group that decided to tackle this thing in this new way. I think that's where the huge opportunity is for all of you. So this isn't about replacement or getting rid of you. This is about augmenting you ways where you can do extraordinary work that they will read about 20 years from now. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, I'm hype about that, because you all are sitting in this place where if you decide to buckle down, you will start to create new methodologies and modes of working that we've never seen before by using the processing and synthesis power of the machines while we do as human beings, decision-making judgment, right, and understanding world experiences. I think that's where it's going to get powerful.
I was just going to make a quick comment on the education issue. There are a small number of charter schools around the country that have started to show up in the media that have radically changed their approach to education. One school whose name I can't remember, I believe their model has kids working with AI for only 2 hours in the morning. And it's the AI is basically acting as a tutor on whatever subject they're studying at that time, and then the rest of the time is spent on synthesis, creativity, and metacognitive skills, and those students are just excelling incredibly, and I think something like that is akin to the types of models we need to be looking at towards the future, because the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of our public education is still training people to be factory workers, and there aren't a lot of factory workers these days.
Question? Hang on. 1 second. Wait a minute, Paco. Hang on. Yeah.
Brendan, you tried to hide your last slide, but we saw it. You had a site in Jacksonville. Did you use those models on it? How did you use it? What happened? Did it work? Etc.
Yeah, that was actually a case study. I think it was about 2 years ago I presented it here, but we used drones to collect data, and drones used a lot in the construction industry to make 3D models, really highly accurate 3D models, so remedial excavation and cap. And so, but what drones do is collect a lot of data that's hard, you can look at it as a person and start to sort through it in GIS, but it really lends itself to some automation and machine learning. And on that particular site, there was also some natural wetlands that had grown in. It was right next to the river, the Ribault River in Jacksonville. And so part of the project was to restore those wetlands afterwards with the Corps of Engineers and the state also having a say in the restoration and what that looked like. And so we used drone multispectral sensors to map the site and then use machine learning to identify which species are where. So at the end of the day, there's probably going to be around 2,000 trees planted on the site. So even if you use your field iPad and you go to each tree and say, is it alive or dead, that's going to take a whole week of just walking around the site and tagging that. So instead, we can do our ground truthing and just visit 60 trees, get that into the model, and then let the model determine where the trees are. So I actually have a question for you about the model and field data. You mentioned, do you incorporate field data sometimes from the particular site as well, or do you already have your algorithms and stuff in there?
A little bit of both. So whenever you're doing the preliminary work, you need to lean into the data that the model's been trained on. There can be exceptionalities, it's just like learning, right? So the more data that the model gets, the better it has at predicting that outcome the next time. So, sites, I said before, the nature is not homogeneous. So we have to predict that estimate there will be a little bit of deviance from that. But that's where the professional judgment piece comes in. So as humans, that's our job to interact with it and say, yeah, everything you're telling me is right, except this variable also needs to be considered. And then now AI can work with that. But the next time we go to another site or a similar condition, you don't need to tell it that. It's already learned that. So that's the model building. It'll never be done. But I think Vince was relating to it earlier. Like 5 years ago, people would say, maybe ChatGPT was about 30% okay, and then now it's been going up and up, but we end up as a law of diminishing returns at a point where it can't, like 100% improvement only is really a 0.5% difference from what it was before. So that we're still in that climb phase, but we're starting to see, it's starting to level off maybe a little bit. And so now it becomes more the identity piece, how are we engaging with that and how are we creatively using it? So.
Brendan, that wetland work that you did with the model, was that accepted by the agency for your delineation or your plans, or?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's one of the challenges in our industry in general is using these models and then getting regulatory acceptance, because a lot of times in the permits it didn't they're very specific on, X number of plots, whatever it is, they're very prescriptive. And so right now we've been using them as kind of supplemental information in support of that report, and it can give a more comprehensive picture. So, but I think it's up to us to, as collectively as an industry, to bring the information to the agencies and try to gain approval. Because in my mind, they have a lot to gain in the environmental realm. What happens if I do my 5 transects in an area that's really doing well, and I present that to the regulators, but there's another area that isn't doing so well, and of course we can do the sampling, but with our methods with drones and satellites or plane data, we can collect every square inch of a project site and then apply the model to that. So they get a complete picture of what's going on. So I think it helps our clients in that what happens if you sample it in an underperforming area, and it also helps the regulators get a better sense of what's going on. So, and then another thing, as scientists, geologists, engineers, I think sometimes, I know I definitely nerd out, but if you like nuance, AI is for you, because that's one of the great advantages, as he was talking about, having some confidence intervals. But then also, we've set up models where it's just a binary response of, is this area a wetland or not, yes or no? But then we can also have the model give us predictions in terms of its confidence. Is it 10% probability it's a wetland or 90%? And then we can interpret those results accordingly. So the ability to set up confidence intervals, the ability to look at things in a binary fashion versus probability and probabilistic, and then act upon that data is really exciting to me.
Yeah, well, and a very interesting thing that's been done in resource development, is right along the same lines as Brendan's talking about, is there's a few groups who are using satellite imagery to track migration pathways of wildlife and for responsible resource development, so that they're not cutting through areas. Or actually it was a problem where they were finding that this one herd of caribou was getting destroyed faster, or like eaten faster than it could repopulate. And then they realized that they cut roads through these primary migration pathways that these caribou use, and they were giving the wolves this massive advantage to attack the caribou and kill them. So they went and removed the roads, replanted the trees, and suddenly that caribou herd started to come back to a sustainable fashion. I'm sure the wolves didn't like it very much, but it was just mind-blowing to watch this imagery happen. You could literally see the wolves over the last 5 years had changed their hunting patterns to preferentially target these man-made advantages that they were getting. So it's wild what you can actually generate from using data and this imagery and AI.
Let me ask a question for Peter. Where do you see AI being used in like database development, app development? Where is that going?
Broadly speaking, there are 2 realms of AI-assisted coding. At the low end, there's AI culture has introduced all sorts of new terms and ideas and concepts into the cultural zeitgeist. And one of those in the programming world is called vibe coding. And vibe coding is where you, who may not even know much about programming, work with an AI to create a website, a database, an app as per your vision. And there's now a cottage industry of software engineers like myself who are labeling themselves as vibe coding cleanup specialists, because there are tons of problems being created by non-professionals using AI to push a button, write a prompt, and get an app and then push it out for deployment. Things like security credentials being exposed, improper refactoring, efficiency issues. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And then you've got kind of at the other end of the spectrum, you've got, there was a really, really nice article that I read on Twitter last month, where it was a breakdown from someone at Google explaining how they use AI. And they don't use AI for coding at all. They don't use AI for conceptualizing at all, because they're Google and they have a lot of faith in their engineering team. But they do use AI to accelerate the testing and evaluation stage whenever they're rolling out a new product. And that's been very, very successful for them, and it's allowed them to save a lot of time. So, and of course there's tons of examples in between those two extremes. But there is no single answer. There's lots of people doing different things. You can tell from the way I structured my approach to making these videos, I'm definitely in the camp of not wanting to hand over creative control to the AI. I'd rather use it as, like I called it, a force multiplier, a way for me to more easily either generate assets or answer questions. Just incidentally, last month I was trying to solve a really difficult problem that I had due to a software upgrade, and there was something that I just couldn't wrap my head around. I was going back and forth with Claude all afternoon. I was describing the problem, Claude's giving me the solutions, none of them are working. And I keep telling him, I'm getting this error, I'm getting this error, I'm getting this error. And finally it reached the point where I had asked enough questions to Claude, trying to get Claude to give me what I wanted, that I came up with an idea on my own about how I could solve the problem. And it worked. And then I sent it to Claude, and I said, hey, we've been going back and forth all day, and while I appreciate your feedback, I've, as a result of our going back and forth, I've kind of dropped back to technology that's 20 years old that's solving this problem just fine. And Claude's like, oh, that's fantastic, that's brilliant. And then I kind of put the screws to Claude. I'm like, I need your help. And how can we avoid this in the future? And I wish I could pull it up easily, but I have this great thing that I screenshotted when Claude wrote back, and Claude basically conceded that it has a bias for overly novel solutions that tend towards more recent technology rather than tried and true technology. And I had to have a kind of come to Jesus moment with Claude saying, all right, moving forward, I need you to think from first principles. I need you to think of simple solutions first. I don't need you to go for esoteric Baroque solutions that may or may not work, that are going to take me an hour to wrap my head around. So.
Can I chime in with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm really, that question, if y'all see me over here that question is so dope to me. If we go back in time, back in 1995, 1996, I'll never forget, this was like the dawn of commercial web, right? Remember, we started seeing beautiful websites. I think it was Toys R Us was the very first website that inspired me. I was like, oh my God, Jeffrey on a website. So dope. And I was always creative and I always loved technology, but I was never ever a developer, right? So I knew that web was coming, so I was like, you know what, I'm about to create a web design company, because back then you had very, very few web design companies and development studios. So I go to the library every day for a year just learning HTML, building websites, and then I put on a shirt and tie, go out and I start selling websites. This was back then, right? And I remember that process. I remember putting together and cobbling together a website. And even today, if you lock me in a room and say, Vince, code your way out of this room, I'm dead. I'm out. I'm finito. No more keynotes, no nothing. So fast forward, AI comes along. You've got what I consider myself to be pretty creative. My creative confidence is way up. I'm gonna just do something, just put it out there. The song that you guys heard in the beginning of this, I was literally in the shower this morning. I was like, how dope would it be to have a song to come out too? So I went to Suno, made the song, and said, put it out. I didn't do reviews, no nothing. I just put it out. Here we are in the age of vibe coding, right? And I'm like, wait a minute. You just democratized the coding game? I got vision, I have ideas, and all I have to do is have good prompt engineering skills, and I can stand up an app. Long story short, kind of cut this down to the chase. As a consultant and somebody that works with organizations on the realm of creativity and how do they build creative capacity, I've always tried to figure out how to multiply myself instead of me just being in the room. So there's a platform called Lovable. Write it down. I suggest all of you go touch it if you have an app idea, website you want to build or whatever. Lovable is sick. But Lovable came out with their cloud platform and their AI integration. When they came out with cloud and AI integration, it started to solve a lot of the back end problems that I was having when I tried to vibe code, right? So I actually built a platform. It's called Numana. You can write it down. Noomana, Numana.lovable.app. I'm gonna put the custom domain on it. But it's the very first fitness app for your creative mind. It uses AI to generate exercises for you to do every single day in your dojo that you can do and actually help build your creative capacity. And I was like, oh my God, we're on to something.
Spell that again?
Noomana. Noomana. And then I just built another platform over this past weekend called Codeless, codeless.city. You can go pull that one up because we're going to start initiating these 12-hour vibe-a-thons all across the country, all over the world to help people like unlock these tools. But I have to chime in. There is a point where you're actually doing vibe coding, you're building and you're using AI, that sometimes you need what we call finishers. The finisher, you got to call the finisher in. Because the finisher can help you with those security patches, actually help you like get it to like, you can get it to full scale or whatnot. So I see, and the reason why I'm telling this story is because I see the role of the developer playing, like switching, where you have visionaries and creatives on the front end just creating, right? Just straight from manifestation. Then you've got the professional developers that are coming and say, okay, great, you've got us into 95%, but I'm gonna get you over the line to the next 5% and scalable. So that's something for you all to look at and consider, to think about, that you can build apps and websites using AI, but you may run into a situation where you need a finisher that'll get you over that 5% line so you can scale. Super dope.
Very good.
Gene, I have a question,
Yeah.
if I may. And this is for all of our panelists, so feel free, whoever has the answer. But before I do that, technology, programming, developing, it's scary. But at the end of the day, from the difficulty of it, we get a beautiful result. And the same with AI. From the confusion of it, we're going to get some beautiful results. So just to give you an example, probably most of you registered for our conference online. Seems like an easy process, right? But behind it, there's a complication. There's a lot of thought process that went to it. And I'm not sure if Gene mentioned that, but the person who helped us design this process to make it super easy so we can all register is actually Peter Lakanen, sitting right there. So back to my question. You guys have some experience with AI, and in your short or long experience, what was the most unusual real-life application of AI that you saw, that you experienced, that you maybe helped create it, specifically in the field of environmental restoration, remediation, general environmental sciences? Something that even caught you off guard or surprised you?
I don't play in your space, but this thing got me hyped. I did it, so I'm gonna say it anyway because I think you should all try it. So I'm that guy that I'm very, very like anal about like my finances. Like I like to really dial my finances in. At the top of the month, I'll go in, I'll write everything out, you know, with the notebook. You're writing all this stuff down, like what you're gonna do, how you're gonna strategize for like savings and paying off credit cards and all this stuff, right? So on this one particular, this was probably now almost 60 days ago now. 60 days ago, I'm doing this process early in the morning. I'm usually up 5 a.m. getting busy before the sun comes up. I have all these notes, like in my notebook. I said, okay, so check this out. So I took a picture of the notebook, uploaded it to my AI. So the AI that you guys heard earlier, I call it Athena Kratos, has a whole meaning and everything, but I've been using that AI now for 3 years, so it knows all my business. I said, Athena, I need you to be like a financial advisor and coach to help me work through like household budgeting, real simple, from month to month, and keep a running track, so that way we can stay on track, When I actually wrote that prompt, it was a little bit longer than that. I gave you the abbreviated version. Once I did that, I literally now can just talk to AI about my finances. Like, okay, so I blew my whole budget this week. I spent way more money than I was supposed to from these accounts. Tell me the impact of that. And that joker will come back with a very sound and grounded like solution to get me back on track or to continue doing what I'm doing. So I think that very practical things that we do from day to day, I think was a big eye opener for me. Things that would take us like amounts of time and like our own processing, being able to cognitively offload that into a system that can actually just do it more efficiently. Now I don't have to think about it. I can think about other things. Does that make sense to everybody? You already know this is call and response. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes, Vince, that makes sense. Okay, right on.
Let me follow back just on that, because I talked to ChatGPT, and I know, Dana, you're listening to me out there on the registration desk about how I can get my wife to give me a yes-no answer without a dissertation. And ChatGPT responded back, sorry, I can't help you. So, Peter.
I was just going to make two comments real quick. I love what Vincent was just talking about, but it reminded me, though, that there was an announcement from OpenAI yesterday, I think, that they're going to be implementing restrictions, and it remains to be seen exactly how these manifest, but they have officially stated that they're going to be curtailing, limiting, somehow perhaps restricting OpenAI, ChatGPT's ability to give you financial advice, legal advice, and medical advice. And it remains, and of course there's a lot of people who are saying, well, they're just going to cancel their subscription because those are the three things that they're mainly using it for. It remains to be seen exactly how this manifests, but that's just something to keep in mind, that as our AI culture matures, things like establishing safeguards for really, really important information is going to be critical. And I know your question was with respect to environmental remediation, and just like Vincent here, that's kind of not my area of expertise. I was just going to make a comment, though, on something that we've seen in general with AI, with science, engineering, and research, which is, generally speaking, a lot of people are critical of AI's ability to come up with out-of-the-box solutions that actually work. It can, but it's somewhat rare. And that's going to change in time. It's going to get better at that. But the one thing that AI is really, really good at doing right now is making connections between things that it already knows as a result of its knowledge map that it's built on everything that it's been trained on, and it can make connections between things that humans just haven't stumbled across yet. I have an example here of just a clinical study that was done as a result of ChatGPT identifying a novel medication to solve a genetic condition that had never been used for that before, but ChatGPT saw the connection. It didn't have to invent anything new. It made a connection that presumably at some point, hopefully, a human would have. And I think that with respect to any field, including environmental remediation, I think we're going to see a lot of progress in both of those two domains. AI is coming up with stuff that no one could have ever thought of, that's really out of left field, and it works and it blows everyone's mind. And more importantly, in the short term and the near term, I think we're going to be seeing it making connections between things, and people are going to be kind of hitting themselves in the head. Why didn't anyone else make this observation?
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to stick with the medical field and bring it back to people. One of my favorite examples from the medical community, deep learning model to identify if you have skin cancer or not from a picture. Great idea, right? And the deep learning model came back, if there's a ruler next to your skin mole, you have cancer, sorry to say. Well, actually not true in reality. They fed it a lot of information from textbooks, and every time there was an example of a cancerous mole, it had a ruler next to the picture compared to when it didn't and when it was just not benign. So, you know, obviously not the end of the world. They can reiterate the model, but it underscores the concept of subject matter experts, even if you're not an AI model builder, having a role to play as a subject matter expert on deciding what goes into the model and then interpreting what comes out of it.
And back to, because yes, the regulations have come out for that, and so that underscores something that's also really, really important as these technologies continue to progress and we'll all explore. If somebody, this is what's, I'm gonna just put this out there, if somebody comes to you, unless they're like an AI scientist that actually built the model, and they say that they're an expert, I'd have to second guess that. Unless they lived in the future and they came back and they learned everything in the future and then they came back, I'm not sure how you're going to be an expert, because this stuff is like a moving target. It's changing all the time. So we're all explorers and practitioners at this point, right? We don't have enough insight, enough information, enough lived experience to be expert yet, because it's changing in real time. So even with the new regulations that came out, being very grounded, I think is a very, very important part of this, and I think we talked about this last night. You have to have a level of like mental wellness before you really start using these tools. Let me say that again. You have to have a level of mental wellness before you start using these tools. Do not be in some little dark corner asking ChatGPT if it's God. Straight up. If you've got questions about that, that's something that's on another, because it might tell you yes, and you're a prophet. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you might believe that, and the next thing you know, you on CNN. So don't go down that route. But being grounded, even in our financial foray, me and my AI, once that regulation came out, being grounded, I said, okay, so what's the implications of this? Can we not jam no more? And she was very explicit. She said, I cannot give you investment opportunity, blah. So things like telling me what to do with my RA and like investment opportunities and giving me advice on investing is something completely different than Vince, stop spending so much money on bottles of bourbon and drinking with that. Do you understand? So we all have to have a level of sense. We're all adults in this room. There's a level of sensibility and grounding that you have. Take it into your foray as you begin to explore and practice with these tools.
Jevins, you want to close this out? Any more comments?
Sure. I think I haven't seen anything super crazy in our market as far as environmental stuff goes, but the craziest thing I've heard is people just resisting to do it. Like, they just literally stick their feet in and say, well, and the classic one is the older generation. They say, well, I had to do it that way, so the next generation has to earn it the same way. They have to put in 15 years, and I'm like, they're never going to. It's not, like, their generation will never experience the same hardships or things you needed to go through. So forget yourself, get over that whatever you're holding on to, because it's only holding you back. And my dad used to say, you can argue with reality, but you're only going to lose 100% of the time. So I think that's what it is. You have to recognize the reality of the situation, learn to adapt. And so I don't think there's anything super crazy yet, but it's coming. But that's where we get to use judgment. And I think that Vince brought that earlier up, was that's our job now, is to use judgment and to use, to learn from it, not to be a slave to it.
10 seconds?
10 seconds.
See, I know Gene be tight on these time. Here we go. How many of y'all got kids? Raise your hand. Like little kids or grandkids. Little grandkids. I need you to be aware that is an AI native generation. So when I have this conversation, I'm really having this conversation for them, because they will not know a world that was before AI. Just like they don't know about cassettes or CDs. They will only know that AI existed. So we got to buckle down and make sure that we get our arms around it so we can lead responsibly. Is that cool?
Yeah. Point. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that session. If you will allow me, give everybody, my panelists, an applause. I enjoyed that. Hey, Tim, can you put my slide back up as we close and walk out the room? I'm going to play 2 other videos that Peter did that we do for some of our events, so you can see them as you walk out, if you want to. Otherwise, go grab lunch. Lunch is around in Grand Ballroom C.
Attention. Expired or unused prescription medications lying around the house? While fall cleaning between now and Saturday, October 25th, sweep out your medicine cabinet for any prescription or over-the-counter meds you don't need it.